Sid Fernando, everyone.
I'm the president of Werk, Thoroughbred Consultants. We're eNICS, which is a computer-generated nicking service. The company is based in California, but I have a lot of New York roots. I'm from Brooklyn. I went to Vassar College in Poughkeepsie. Know Tom Gallo for about 30 years from around here, and I'm very familiar with New York breeding, and so it's an honor to be here actually to speak to you guys. What we'll do is break it down right now as simply as possible. What is a nick? A nick is simply a sire line cross. That is, it measures the success of a stallion or his sire line with a broodmare sire or sire line. So it's nothing more than that. The sire or the sire line, say, distorted humor, his sire 49er, and say he was mated to a daughter of AP Indy, so AP Indy, Seattle Slew, various combinations of that will determine the nick, but it's based only on that. It has nothing to do, obviously, with the female family involvement or dosage or anything else like that that might confuse the matter. Here's a pedigree of Rachel Alexandra, as you can see. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of an emerging nick that has taken place with her sire, Medaglia d'Oro, and her broodmare sire line. So you can see Roar is the son of 49er, is the son of Mr. Prospector. So when we're looking at a nick here, we're looking at the sire line of her sire, Medaglia d'Oro, and his sire line with the cross or nick with the broodmare's sire line. Now, let's move to this pedigree. Songbird. Take a look at this. Medaglia d'Oro out of a Westacre mare by 49er. Very similar pedigree. Both of them top fillies. Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah, it's, how's this, better? Okay, so what's interesting here is that you've had two outstanding fillies, both bred on a very similar pattern. Let's go here. Breeders' Cup winner, New Money Honey. You can see the similarity, can't you? Medaglia d'Oro out of a distorted humor mare by 49er. In each case, we're seeing Medaglia d'Oro with 49er. You see how that nick is developing? You can see it. In that particular case, it's actually the sire with various combinations of 49er's sons. We've had 49er's son Roar for Rachel Alexandra. We've had 49er's son Westacre for Songbird, and now we have 49er's son Distorted Humor for New Money Honey. I don't know if you guys saw a Claiborne homebred who won very big recently at Aqueduct, a 2-year-old filly named Elate. Medaglia d'Oro out of a Distorted Humor mare again. First time winner, won by 12 lengths. So you can see the common thread in this particular nick. Let's take a look at the pedigree of Secretariat now, so everyone can have a common great to look at. Secretariat is by Bold Ruler out of Something Royal by Prince Quillo. That nick, an old-time nick, is what was the Nasrullah Prince Quillo nick. Nasrullah is the son of Bold Ruler, and obviously Prince Quillo's daughter, Something Royal, produced Secretariat. Now, Prince Quillo and Nasrullah were both at the same farm. So keep that in mind, Claiborne Farm. Claiborne had Prince Quillo. They had a bunch of daughters of Prince Quillo, and when they imported Nasrullah in the early 50s, they had mares by Prince Quillo to breed to Nasrullah. And later, they had mares by Prince Quillo to breed to Nasrullah's sons. In this case, Bold Ruler was retired to Claiborne, and that pattern was followed. This is Paul Mellon's Mill Reef. Look at the similar pattern here. Nasrullah's son Never Bend with a daughter of Mill Reef. I mean, with a daughter of Prince Quillo, sorry. Essentially what happens is nicks develop when a successful pattern emerges. People start to follow, what was done before. Let's take a look at this pedigree right here. Empire Maker, this is grade 1 winner in lingerie. Empire Maker out of a Stormcat mare. Now this mare was foaled in 2009. Empire Maker would later go on, be exported to Japan, but he started to have a lot of success with Stormcat mares, or mares from the Stormcat line. So look at this. Here's Triple Crown winner American Pharaoh, right? Look at the similarity. Empire Maker's son, Pioneer of the Nile, bred to a Stormcat line mare. I'm giving you various combinations of sires and sire lines with broodmare sire lines. The way our company will qualify a nick, it's dependent on an algorithm we have, but what might be considered the best data match. In this particular case, when Pioneer of the Nile went to stud, he has no record himself as a sire. So you have to look at what happened with his sire, Empire Maker. And essentially, that's how you'll start to formulate what a nick might end up being like. However, once a stallion goes to stud and starts to establish his own credentials, he may deviate from his own sire. He may create his own patterns of breeding. But in this particular case, you can see the similarity to in lingerie with the sire. Here's another one. Stakes win. This is from our website. Stakes winners on the Empire Maker Stormcat nick. You'll note at this point you have American Pharaoh, Bodemeister. In lingerie, I just mentioned to you. Classic Empire, who won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He's, again, by Pioneer of the Nile, out of a Stormcat line mare. So let's just review this for a second now. How do nicks develop? As I mentioned to you, historically, nicks develop when the daughters of one stallion at the same farm were bred to the new stallion at the farm. In the case of Prince Quillo that I noted with you guys, Prince Quillo, obviously a Claiborne stallion, they had the daughters. A new stallion came in, Nasrullah. By convenience, they bred their daughters. Now, this was an old paradigm. It's the way breeding used to be, as a lot of people my age or older might remember from the 70s and earlier, 80s even. Farms would have stallions. It wasn't as commercial as it is now. There were a lot of home breeders, owner breeders, and they were interested in breeding daughters of their own stallions to the new stallion that they got. And that was a pattern, and that's how a nick could develop. Now, sometimes you may have a negative nick. I'll give you an example of that. I use Claiborne as an example. The Phippses, as you know, board their mares at Claiborne, stood some of their top sires at Claiborne. Well, Bold Ruler, who for the Phippses was a tremendous stallion at Claiborne, gave them a lot of daughters. When they retired when Ogden Phipps retired his top horse, Buck Passer, to the farm, they bred Bold Ruler mares to Buck Passer. Guess what? Didn't work out. Negative nicks don't really get a lot of publicity. There was one very good filly that Denny Phipps had named Quick as Lightning from this cross, a Buck Passer daughter out of Clear Ceiling by Bold Ruler. He sent her to Europe to race, and she won the 1,000 guineas. That's a tip-off, by the way, to why that nick didn't work in this country. The knees. The nick sometimes is a manifestation of some physical issues as well. The Buck Passer Bold Ruler cross created a situation where you weren't getting a lot of runners because there was a physical attribute to it. They didn't take to the hard tracks in the United States. When he sent one daughter to Europe on a soft turf, she won the 1,000 guineas. Even though that was a negative nick here, it succeeded over there with a different racing environment. So getting to point 2, successful patterns were then copied by other owner breeders. Later, in the modern era, commercial breeders bred daughters of one major stallion to another. I mean, you know, you bred daughters of Stormcat to AP Indy. I mean, it's just, sometimes without thought, it was just a good stakes-winning daughter. You breed the best of the best, and when they start to work out, it's, you know, other breeders copy them. And number 4, sometimes breeders randomly find that certain sire lines appear to be working with other lines. I don't know how many of you are on Twitter, but recently Cormac Brethnack of Adena Springs just tweeted this the other day. Adena Springs stands Ghost Zapper. Now, can you all read that tweet? An exciting emerging cross is Ghost Zapper with 49er. So far, 15 starters, 13 winners, 6 stakes winners, 4 graded stakes winners. Now, Adena Springs just happened to notice that, tweeted that information out. Of course, promotionally, they're looking for breeders to know this information so that they could consider something like this for Ghost Zapper. He also pointed out, not surprisingly, most are out of distorted humor mares, but Coronado's Quest, Twining, and Gold Case also represented. Let's take a look here at an Enix cross for the Ghost Zapper 49er cross. You can see here, and this is what our company's printout looks like. This cross has the highest cross that we give, which is an A triple plus. An A plus plus is a very high cross, but if there's a grade 1 winner on the cross as well as a grade 2 winner, we rate it an A triple plus. What this sheet shows you is a 5-generation pedigree. It shows you inbreeding. You'll notice that there's a 4x4 across the in reality. Now, if you're not familiar with inbreeding, I just explained it to a gentleman earlier. Obviously, that's when a common ancestor is in the sire and the dam, and the number 4x4 means here it's in the 4th generation of both. So you'll see that in reality, if you can see it, I'm not sure you can, in reality appears 4x4 in this particular pedigree. A practical lesson: how do you check the nick of a prospective mating? Well, Tom told me to use my own website, so I'm going to do that. Our own company website here to explain to you how you can actually go. You just go to enix.com. Right here is what the website looks like. You can log into a free password, and you'll get this screen that'll come up. Now let me just show you something here. You see where it says Mare Match? That feature is only available from our company, and what that feature is you'll put your mare's name in there. If our system doesn't have the full pedigree, you might have to enter a couple of generations. It's very quick. But you put her name in there. You can then specify what geographic location you want for that stallion and what particular geographic location. You can also specify by stud fee range, and then the system will automatically give you a list of the best crosses for that mare. So here, I put in Rachel Alexandra, as you can see on the top left, typed her name in there. That's the pedigree. You just confirm it. I put down Kentucky as the geographic location. Stud fee range, I'm going to put 50,000 and above. It spits out these horses with the best nicks. You'll see Speightstown, Bernardini, Malibu Moon, Warfront, Frosted, Tappet, Distorted Humor, and Giant's Causeway. Those are the best nicks for Rachel Alexandra. I clicked on Bernardini, and I get the nick sheet right here. It's A triple plus. Now, here's an important thing about nicks. Nicks are based on the success of stakes winners, right? So that A triple plus is based on an algorithm of stakes winners from around the world bred on this type of cross. Sometimes you may want to find out if that cross is better in North America, for example, than somewhere else. You see, by the way, view stakes winners on the cross, that button on the top. If you hit that, you'll get a listing of all the best stakes winners bred on the cross. It gives you the name, year of birth, sex, best win at the group race level, dirt, all-weather turf, the pedigree, and you can look at the wins and the pedigree specifically. Now here's that part I was talking to you about, geo-nicks. North America, Europe, Australia. Some nicks are only specific to the United States, but because we take a global analysis, the global nick rating might be different than the geolocation nick. So let's take a look at this nick for North America. We find that it's a terrific nick. In fact, Rachel's Valentina, which was Rachel Alexandra's daughter by Bernardini, is a G1 winner. It's on that nick, obviously. It's a great nick in North America, right? Bernardini with Medaglia d'Oro. If you take a look at it in Europe, it's an F nick. So that's why sometimes it's important to look at the geographic location of a nick as well. And that's available from our website. And just to review, when you bring up the nick, you'll see stakes winners, geo nicks. You can email the nick to somebody. These are the stakes winners on the cross. Here's the option for the geo nick. A nick sometimes might be inflated by, say, stakes winners in Australia. Here, for example, I showed you that this particular nick is an A triple plus in North America and an F in Europe. There are some nicks that might be an A triple plus, but when you look at the North American portion of it, it may actually be an F nick here. Danzig, for example, is so prevalent in Australia that a lot of Danehill crosses that are used in the calculation of a nick might skew that nick to make it higher here, or higher globally than it is in North America. So these are just some tools that we have that you can look at and utilize in terms of analysis. Now, real quickly, the nick, and we always say this to people, clients that we do pedigree analysis for, the nick is a starting point. It's not the end all. Even though we're a nick, even though our company is the originator of eNICs, I'm going to tell you this right now. For example, Storm Boot, a Stormcat horse, small horse in Kentucky from some time ago. The Stormcat Rahi cross had been really good. Giant's Causeway is better on that cross. Rahi, however, is a very small horse too, was a small horse. So, you know, somebody looking at the Stormcat Rahi cross might say, hey, why don't I take my small Rahi mare and take it to the small Storm Boot? And we'd say that's not a good idea unless you want to breed, you know, small horses. Use common sense, obviously. The nick is a great indicator. The nick is only a sire line cross, so that's why it's important to look at the entire pedigree of a horse, because you might say have a great nick, and you might find out that the pedigree shows that there's inbreeding 2x2 to Giant's Causeway or something. You don't want that. So you've got to look at the nick as a starting point. You then look at the female family. You look at the quality of the parents. The quality of breeding stock is paramount. And you look at the physical horse, and I'm sure somebody's going to talk about that later. But these are all the components that are taken into account when we do pedigree analysis. There's a lot more we do too. I don't want to make it too complicated. I did want to, because Tom had suggested really explaining the concept of what a sire line cross or nick is. And so we're going to leave it at that here. I have some handouts from our company up there, 4 handouts. Also, you know, if you want to enroll your stallion in the eNICs program, there's information up there. At this point, I'm going to take some questions. So if you have any, feel free to speak up.
Hi, Sarah Mace.
Hi, Sarah.
You said that the nick can manifest a sort of physical compatibility between lines. It strikes me that it might be, isn't what's on paper sort of largely reflecting a physical conjunction between the two lines?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, really, when you're looking at, I mean, I can't pinpoint and say yes, but whenever something, whenever something like that works, there's obviously some physical component that's making it successful. That these lines are really gelling together, and we might not know exactly what it is, but certainly that's the theory behind it. And in the reverse, when it doesn't work, it's very likely, and I gave that example of, say, Buck Passer with Bull Ruler, where you had 2 outstanding physical specimens and 2 outstanding horses, maybe a little weakness in the knee that we know, and perhaps that works. Now, confirmation, you know, I have to give, actually I should mention this particular example because this really hits part of that question too. Many of you remember Spend a Buck, a great racehorse. Remember when he went to stud at Lane's End? A lot of fanfare. Will Farish had him, bred to top mares. Didn't do anything. And then he just kind of kicked around. He was in Texas and Louisiana. Well, during a couple of his years in Louisiana, some people in Brazil had taken him on a shuttle for a couple of years. And guess what? He started to hit in Brazil. And part of that reason was the type of mare that he was getting. He was from a Buck Passer line, which had pretty much died out in this country. There wasn't the type of mare that he needed to succeed. He didn't have, he had, I believe he had 12 Grade 1 winners, and each of those Grade 1 winners had a South American component to the pedigree. Even the one that was bred here, Anti-Spend, if you look closer into that particular case, you'll find, not in the Anti-Spend case, but in Spend a Buck, where he really succeeded were with mares by a Brazilian stallion named Gadir, who was bred to mares by Waldmeister. Now, I remember I gave you that Nasrullah Prince Quillo thing, Claiborne Farm doing that. Well, down in Brazil, there is a major farm similar to Claiborne called Fazenda Mondesir, and they had a bunch of mares by a stallion named Waldmeister, and then they later brought in a stallion named Gadir, and they bred the Waldmeister mares to Gadir, and they had all these mares by Gadir out of Waldmeister, and when Spend a Buck came down, they bred a bunch of those to him, and he got 6 of his 12 Grade 1 winners were out of mares by Gadir. Einstein is one of them, as you probably remember here. So guess what? It wasn't that Spend a Buck was a dud. He didn't have the mares and what he needed in the population here. And he found it there by chance. So, and the physical component of that, those Gadir Waldmeister mares, for whatever reason, they really fit that horse. And they fit him physically, they fit him on pedigree, and at the very end, he died, and he had some posthumous success by getting these Grade 1 winners at the end. But anyway, that's a good question. I know there were a couple of questions here. This lady right here.
Tracy Egan.
Hi, Tracy.
Sometimes I get asked by breeders, they'll call up and say, well, this stallion isn't on eWorks yet, or eNix yet, and I want to know what the nick would be with my mare.
Yeah.
So can they go to, say, let's say it's a son of Mineshaft or whatever, can they go to Kentucky and check out that nick with a Mineshaft himself, and does it carry over? Is there a correlation?
Okay, good question. If your stallion is enrolled in eNix, you can get it for free. That's what he means. If it's not enrolled, you can get it, but you have to pay like $10. So you can still get it. Now, you can check another stallion, like I said, to see the nick, sire line cross, but you're going to miss the internal part of the pedigree. So you might see that it's a good nick, but like I mentioned earlier, what if it's a 2x2 cross to something that's not in that pedigree? That's why you should really use the stallion you're using to check it, because it's not just the nick, but other elements of the pedigree you might want to check. In fact, I had a client call. One of our clients is the Albaugh Family Trust. We had helped, we gave advice on the mating of Liam's map, and they sold him, and then, and these are clients, by the way, that we give them, we do some analysis, and they'll pick the stallion. They're the breeders, all credit to them, but they used our service as analysis. So they got Not This Time, who was a Giant's Causeway horse. He just had to be retired, unfortunately, a top 2-year-old. They also had purchased Brody's Cause last year, and he's going to stud at Spendthrift. He's also by Giant's Causeway. So they were buying mares at the November sale for Brody's Cause, and they said, can we use this to check for Not This Time too, in case we want to buy the mares? Very similar example. I said, yeah, but be careful, because you want to see the internal part of a pedigree. One mare they wanted to get had a great nick, but her dam was out of Giant's Causeway. Ended up being, and that's why I bring up the Giant's Causeway. I said, well, that mare is inbred 2x2 to Giant's Causeway. He said, yeah, that's right, I can't use it. So that's why it's important to actually look at the stallion's pedigree. I know there was another question here.
Yes, I wanted to know, you mentioned an algorithm that works to create the nick. So how does that take into account the frequency that the cross was tried? Or does one stakes winner turn into a nick, even though there may have been 15 tries at that cross?
Okay. When you're talking about a nick, we feel it's not just about the one stallion. They're sire line crosses. And I'll give you a specific example. I showed you the Empire Maker cross with Stormcat line mares. Now, there's some handouts that I had put up at the top that actually explain this in detail more than we talked about here. But I want to talk about the specific thing because at the Saratoga yearling sale, there was a colt by Pioneer of the Nile out of a Tail of the Cat mare. And we had given this a very high rating because of our data set that used Empire Maker with Stormcat. Now, our algorithm searches for the best possible thing. You know, you could go up higher and say unbridled with something like that too. Another service for this particular nick gave it a D rating because their paradigm was that they went up to unbridled and unbridled song and all his sons with Tail of the Cat and found that it wasn't successful. Our algorithm realized that we should use Empire Maker only because Pioneer of the Nile doesn't have many foals yet, except a few, 3 crops, with the Stormcat line. Well, one of those horses that was rated an A++ ended up being Classic Empire, who won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile and is the potential 2-year-old champion. He was rated by us as an A++ as a yearling, whereas another service had it as a D+, because they were looking at data sets of Unbridled Song and Tail of the Cat. Now, I bring up Unbridled Song because he is also an unbridled stallion, as is Empire Maker, but they're very different characteristically. Empire Makers are more stamina-oriented horses. The Unbridled Songs are horses that have a lot of speed and stamina, bigger horses. They show a lot early. They're very good spring 3-year-olds, but they have some different characteristics from Empire Maker. So because of that, we kind of grade these horses separately, and that comes into our algorithm, which is why it chooses its data sets based on our inputs. But for the most part, you have to understand that sire line crosses really shouldn't be just the one sire, unless that sire has enough data to look at it. It should look at, and that's why it's called a nick, you know, several generations of the sire, or at least a couple to get an idea with the female line to come up with this. Now, this is not an exact science, but it's a gauge again. And you know, even if you didn't use any nicking service, you could go to the equine line, and they actually tell you how many stakes winners have been produced by a certain cross, how many runners. It'll tell you all that stuff anyway, you know. But we're only interested in our service in the highest level, so that we can try to find some patterns at the highest levels. So I hope that answered some of that.
Actually, it doesn't, but that's all right.
Okay.
No, I was not asking. I was asking about when a cross produces a stakes winner.
Yeah.
Is one stakes winner sufficient to become a nick, regardless of whether the cross might have been tried 15 times?
Well, it depends. Like I said, if that one cross for that sire, but it's also looking at his sire too. So his sire might have 15 stakes winners on that cross. So you take, the algorithm takes into what he's done, factors in the one here, and makes a predictive, well, maybe because these are small samples, it'll follow that pattern, even though it hasn't shown much yet.
That's what I was getting
Yeah, okay.
at, was how big a sample do you require?
Yeah, keep in mind that these are all small samples, so you have to, the further back you go, you get bigger samples. So we always look further back and see the trends, and then we try to make a predictive model based on that.
At what point with inbreeding
Yeah.
Do you tend to say, okay, stay away, it's getting too close, 3-4, 4-4, or pushing it even closer than that? And what facts do you take into consideration?
Okay, that's a good question. We make suggestions to people. Sometimes there's instances where close inbreeding works. Actually, Seth Hancock was asked that question once, and it's in Ed Bowen's book, Great Breeders, and their Great Breeders, Volume 2. And there was, if you remember, Scriptar Farm from New York, Winlock, the name. He was a early Ray Roncari, I believe was his name, from New York. I don't know if many breeders remember Mr. Roncari. He was a New York breeder. All his horses had the Winlock name on it. Winlock's Princess, Winlock's whatever. Anyway, he was a early shareholder in Mr. Prospector when Seth Hancock and Peter Brandt bought Mr. Prospector from Florida to Claiborne, and he had bred a mare of his, a New York bred, to Mr. Prospector, and then he wanted to breed that mare by Mr. Prospector back to Mr. Prospector, which would be 1/2 Mr. Prospector. Now, guess what? He was a shareholder in the horse. Seth Hancock couldn't stop him, and he bred that mare. And there, Winlock's Princess or something, if you look it up, you'll find it. She's inbred 1/2 to Mr. Prospector, which is one of the most severe cases of inbreeding you're going to find. Getting to your larger question, statistically, we found by analyzing stakes winners that stakes winners, horses that have inbreeding lower than 3/3, so 2/3, 3/2, 2/2, are not as successful as horses that are inbred 3/4, 4/4, 4/5, 5/4. So if you have inbreeding, statistically, it shows that you're a little better off having some generational distance. Having said that, there are some breeders that do breed closely. Sometimes they breed to mares, the Rasmussen factor, inbreeding to a superior female. Leon Rasmussen was a really good friend of mine. In fact, when I got into this, the way I was, when I grew up, I was interested in pedigrees, and when I was 16 in 1976, I actually sent a letter to Leon, who was, if you don't know who he was a great breeding writer for the Daily Racing Form and an author, wrote the Bloodlines column. I was 16, he was in his 50s. I sent him a letter discussing a breeding theory, shocked to get a letter back from Leon. He actually sent me a 16-year-old thing back, and we ended up having a lifetime of writing back and forth, got to know each other. He was a great advocate of inbreeding to superior females. If you look at the pedigree of Quiet American, John Nerud bred him for Tartan Farms, you'll see some heavy inbreeding in that family, including inbreeding to Sequillo, the broodmare of third dam, I believe, of Fapiano, and might be the second broodmare sire of Quiet American. But that was a suggestion by Leon Rasmussen to John Nerud to do that, and John Nerud did it. And there was some other inbreeding in there too, and it turned out great. So I'm not against the wholeheartedly against inbreeding, but if you have a reason why you're doing it, it works. I just told this gentleman here that we found with Super Saver and with Lemon Drop Kid, there have been instances of some close inbreeding to Seattle Slew that works, 3/3, so or higher. So you need to research it and take a look at it. But in general, lower than 3/2, I would not suggest.
The one that comes to mind, I believe, is Flower Alley. Wasn't that a 2/2 cross?
Flower Alley, let me look it up here real quick. Flower Alley is by Distorted Humor, and what we have in Flower Alley is 3/3 to Mr. Prospector. So, that's a 3/3 to a sire. If you look at Quiet American, who I mentioned, I'll just pop him up here real quick. Here's the inbreeding of Quiet American I told you about. I'm sorry I can't put it up there, but 3x2 to Dr. Fager, 3x3 to Sequillo, 4x3 to Sequillo. So there's a lot of close inbreeding that does occur. Usually people have a plan what they're doing with it, and that's fine. But in general, again, the closer it is, it's probably not as good, statistically anyway. If you go back to France, Marcel Boussac had an ARC winner that was inbred 2x2 to a female. Several people have done it, but go ahead. One more?
Hi.
Hi.
Mallory Mort. I've got one suggestion. First of all, I like your site. I use it. I got a desk covered with hypos right now. But anyways, one suggestion for the site maybe would be to be able to pick one stallion and then list several mares that you might potentially want to breed to that stallion, as opposed to having to go back in and do an individual mare each time.
So you're saying...
in other words, let's say my boss says, I want to breed to this stallion.
Yeah.
So I can go in and maybe you could click just one stallion on this particular way of doing it.
Yeah.
But you could list several mares.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah, actually, other people have mentioned that too.
Yeah. Okay.
Might take. Thank you for that suggestion. Yeah. Appreciate it.